Hi there, this is Tamara Doris, and I'm so excited about the show today. I want to preface it by saying what's really interesting to me is 5 years ago when I started doing radio and video, my followers were all the business community, salespeople, real estate. If I would have had a show on spirituality, I think that it would have freaked people out. But I noticed over the last couple of years that people are being more open to the ideas. You want to know, you're asking me, what about the law of attraction and how do we get rid of stress and all this stuff? So I am super pleased that we're growing and we're getting into that more enlightened stage. And so with that, I have a fabulous guest today. She's an extraordinary person. Her name is Teal Scott. Teal, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited and I'm honored to help you spread the word, but I will tell you, you are doing a fabulous job on your own. I wrote this down. People go to thespiritualcatalyst.com, and again, her name is Teal Scott, and we will much later talk about her fabulous book that you're going to want to buy. But for now, if we can, Teal, let's just start, if you don't mind, by explaining to people the difference between a channel and a psychic, because you have said you're not channeling information, that you're just psychic and born with it.
Okay, so a channel basically is able to get their own persona, their personal frequency basically, to a high enough degree that they are able to match an even higher frequency that can then use their physical body. So the best way to think about a channel is to think about a radio antenna. So let's say that there's this channel that's being broadcast, always broadcast, because we know that about the channels of the radio. They're basically around us all day long, and all we need to do to get that channel is to tune the dial to whatever channel it is. So a person who's able to channel an entity is able to get their frequency into the vicinity, kind of like tuning your car dial, where that particular vibration is, which is a super high vibratory rate. And by doing so, they get themselves in a state of allowing to such a degree that now they are able to literally be a passageway through which that channel can come into the physical dimension. So it's almost like you're putting your entire personal identity aside to let this other being come through and utilize your lips and your vocal cords.
Got it. Okay.
Whereas a basic psychic, I guess you could call it a psychic or someone with extrasensory abilities, or a medium, is somebody who is able to receive that channel but translate it. So the identity doesn't go anywhere. It's not like when I am speaking to somebody, I have no awareness of what I have said because Teal is gone and something else has taken its place. It's that, this person is acting as Teal is acting as a translator for the higher self, for all of these beings that are everywhere, and is bringing forth personal knowledge as well.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. So I guess the next question then is when people are channeling, and we have so many all across the world. People here talk about Abraham. We have Jane Roberts who did Seth. We have Lazarus in Europe. We have so many people who are channeling. Yet what I've read is that it's from different places. I mean, someone here says it's an alien, someone here says it's God, someone here says it's, these entities. So from where you sit, and I think that you see the big picture, what are they channeling? Where is the information coming from?
All of the information is coming from source energy, which if you take the collective conscious of everything in existence, that if you added it all up is source energy. But what you'll notice with channels is that they're going to channel whatever they vibrate the closest with. So a person whose identity is going to be the most allowing to an angel will probably channel like an 11th dimensional being, and that being will come across as an angel with a name and everything.
Okay.
Yeah, so you'll notice that let's say that somebody resonates with aliens. If they resonate and their personal frequency matches that more so, then they will channel energy that has broadcast down into another area of our galaxy or another galaxy, and then has sort of forked over. So what we channel is all about our own personal frequency and what we resonate with.
Okay.
So that's why it does you so good if you're looking for somebody to listen to in terms of channels, to find a channel who is actually channeling something that you resonate with as well.
I love it, and I love how you say another galaxy, just like you're saying, please pass the salt. You know, it's just you're just for your comprehension is just it cracks me up, but I love it. Okay, you said angel, so I want to know the difference in what an angel is versus a spirit guide or a higher spirit. You know, what is the difference in that?
There is no difference.
Oh, there is no difference. Okay,
Of course, you're going to get a lot of people that are going to argue with me about that one.
sure.
But yeah, no. So basically, all right. So an angel is a spirit guide that came forward in a way in which the humans would understand. So what you have way back when angels started appearing with the wings and everything was during a time in human civilization where the fastest way to pass a note between one person and another person was a carrier pigeon. And so these messengers, which are just guides, they're spirit guides, they come across with an image that makes sense to you. And so if you're not yet at the point where you can be clairaudient, they will come across with a vision you can understand. And so the reason they came across with the wings was to give the message, guess what? I'm a messenger from God. That's all it had to do with. But it's out of context now, because
Sure.
now we don't use carrier pigeons, we use email. And so it's like wings. Yeah, nobody really knows why they show up with wings. It's not about the wings. It's about the fact that a spirit guide will choose to bring forth any image that is going to have meaning about what the purpose they serve in your life.
That makes sense. Okay, so with that said, does everybody, all of us humans, do we all have spirit guides?
Yes, without fail, multiple.
Okay.
I have never met a person that has less than 3,
And how do you,
which
how
is
do you
good
know?
news. How do I know?
No, I mean, can you like look at someone or do you feel their energy? How do you see them? I'm just wondering for you, is it audio? Is it visual?
All of the above. It's like talking to another person in the room, but they hold a different frequency rate, and so it's kind of like looking at one type of static energy versus another type of static energy on a television screen, which is the only thing that makes it so that I know what is and is not physically manifested. It's not like they're a nebulous mist or anything.
All right, okay. So, and with that said, so then you also see auras.
Yeah.
Okay, and it was interesting. We had a radio show a few weeks ago where I had an aura, a woman who reads auras. I think we had 2,800 people listening to that show live because it's a sign of the times. People are so interested in it.
Yep.
Yeah. So
Very much so.
so that's what you see when you see now. Are all colors the same? Like this woman told me, I had a yellow aura.
You do have a yellow aura. Yep.
Okay, and so and I'm very beginning at this, but my guess would be that you have a violet one.
Mm-mm.
No?
Indigo. It's sort of purplish, but yeah.
You're an indigo okay, that says a lot, right? Because the whole idea of indigo is you're here to change the world.
Basically.
Right? I got chills when I said that. Okay, so here's another important question, and I know you've talked a little bit about this on your videos, but I came across something the other day. I was reading about Jesus, and I read something that said, you know, people over the centuries have really got this thing all messed up. Jesus didn't come here so we would worship him. He came here as an example of pure alignment. And that, it was like, I went, really? Could that be true? So talk about that a little bit. Who was Jesus, and what was the whole deal there?
Oh, Lord. How deep do you want to go on this one?
Just sum it up in 5 minutes. No, seriously, I want to hear whatever thoughts you have to say that you want to share.
Jesus was a hybrid. He was a mix between a Pleiadian and a human. His mother was a human, not a saint. But his paternal aspect was actually a Pleiadian, which is non-human. And so a lot of times when people have thought over the centuries that they've seen angels, it's actually been extraterrestrial beings. Because when the extraterrestrial being comes through the 4th and 5th dimension in order to create effects here in the 3rd dimensional awareness, they come across as light beings, especially with a very blue hue to them. And so that interaction, which was an immaculate conception, was not immaculate conception. It was a pretty typical Pleiadian conception, ironically. So what had happened basically at the times was that all of the religious asking, which is subconscious asking within the human race, had been percolating so strong that asking had actually reached other areas of our universe, and it was answered, as it usually is, by someone who has the answer. And so these beings come down in order to give the human race the perspective which is going to help them into the new place. But we have this major issue, which is we've got this person who's super in alignment, and that was not how it was from the beginning, I might add. It's not like this Messiah was born and was never cultured. He was very much cultured. In fact, the last years of his life he spent studying Buddhism. So he goes on this trek all over through India and all those countries, and he comes back and he's got this whole new perspective, but it becomes his teachings. And basically, if you sum it up, it's the same that all the great channels are talking about right now. You create your own reality. You are one with everything that is. The kingdom of heaven is within, not without. You know, the major messages, basically. Basically, it puts the power back in the human being to be everything that you have ever wanted to be. And this message of freedom was something which was greatly needed at that particular time. And the dramatic exit which he made from this planet, of course, made his message all the more extreme. But the issue is that
You're cutting out just
person talking, but adding their little spin to it, and then the next person. And so now you've got these teachings which are not reflective of the actual teachings of Jesus.
right.
And when you've got translations, we've got it doubly bad, because most of us who are obsessed with the Bible are now English. We speak English. There's major issues when you translate these Sumerian texts and the original languages that all of those things were written into U.S. understanding, especially, but English in general. Just because you can't translate some of these words directly, because the cultural concepts are lost, because they're not cultural concepts we have. For example, one of the biggest blaring examples is that when he says, "I am the Son of God," son in that particular language does not mean son in the same way it means here, where you are literally the flesh of the loins. Son means extension of. So what he was literally saying is, you are an extension of God. You are God. But the problem is when you translate it to son, now suddenly we think, oh, it's just him. He's like literally the Messiah, the physical Son of God, and nobody else is, because he's the Son. So just that one mistranslation, look how much can happen just based on that. And that's one of so many of these mistranslations.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, can you, and I don't mean to sound naive here, but can you explain what a Palladian is?
A Palladian is an extra.
Okay, so that's just another word for
yeah.
for an alien. Are there a lot of different kinds of aliens?
Yes.
Okay. And
the Pleiadians are a very specific. So basically, if you look up in the sky and you see the constellation of Taurus, Taurus's tail is this little cluster, and that's the Pleiades constellation. It's a group of 7 main planets, all of which have different forms of life, and each of those life forms are referred to as Pleiadians.
Okay, and so, and I've always known there was something out there. Anyway, so I understand that. Was there a reason that the Pleiadians and to create Jesus? Was there a reason? Was it to give us this powerful message? And did having half Pleiadian birth give him more power to do the things that he did to show us the miracles?
Not more power. What we would say is a different perspective. So the reason perspective is the most important thing there is. If you really want to talk about power, power is all about knowledge. And a different perspective is going to herald different knowledge. And so when someone comes in, see, when you look at children are actually the extension of the perspective of the dad and the perspective of the mother. Those perspectives is what actually goes into the genetics. Genetics are just a reflection of thought patterns. So you are literally passing on your collective thought patterns to a being. So Jesus is the byproduct of this thought pattern that is Pleiadian and the thought pattern that is human, and that creates a very unique perspective, one which really did answer the questioning within mankind. The reason that happened, of course, is that from a 6-dimensional perspective, which is where the Pleiadian race is not in a physical 3rd-dimensional reality. They are 6-dimensionally focused. From that perspective, you do not have the degree of separation you do in the physical dimension. And because of that, you don't miss this universal truth that you are everything that is. And the minute that there is one thing in the universe that is suffering greatly, it is your suffering as well. So in order to come into most alignment, you can do no other than to lend a hand. And so they're at a point right now where their society has begun to become so utopian that there's very little contrast, which is the case with most extraterrestrial beings that are helping humanity. They have managed to eradicate so much contrast from their particular situation that there's very little expansion coming through them. Like universal expansion is a byproduct of things that are unwanted. So when there's not very many unwanted experiences, there's not very much to be desired in that species. And so universal expansion sort of peters out through them. And so it becomes suddenly an interest to help other areas where there's a massive amount of contrast and thus a massive amount of expansion. If you knew that oneness was the truth of this universe and you had the wherewithal to help yourself, let's call yourself a human, you would very likely come here in order to deliver a message which would help them line up with what they truly desired.
So basically, we're at the bottom of the evolution totem pole, and we have all this growth ahead of us.
Not the bottom, but yes.
Not the bottom, but we still have a lot ahead of us, in other words.
Oh, yeah.
Now, let me ask you something, Teal. I know that you have memories of pre-birth and being born, but what point, and I'm guessing you had to be speaking at that age, what point was it that your parents, who I've heard on another video you said were kind of science-based, science thinking, at what point, what did you do or say, for example, that led them to think, okay, this is not your average little girl here. There's something different about her. Can you remember? Can you give us an example?
Oh, yeah. Like, for example, when my mother first tried to take me into a movie, I was 2 years old, and I sat there with my hand over my ears, and I started yelling that I could hear whatever the movie theater from the movie theater. Another example is that because I have synesthesia, which is quite common in people that have extrasensory abilities. Whenever there was loud noise or anything, I would actually see it across my visual field, and I started to notice that even when I was about 6 months old, they'd clap, and I'd be like looking around, watching it in my visual field, Yeah. And so it was, stuff like that. It was the get-go where it was just time after time after time of stuff like that. Me talking to my parents about dead people that I'd never met before. I'd be like sitting there playing around with stuff, and then I'd look at them and be like, yeah, your grandpa says this to you. I was like, grandpa who? And I'd, its tales just like endless and endless. And then talking about colors around people started really early too. Because I'd identify people by virtue of their aura color. So my mom would say, do you remember, your teacher, Miss Hart? And I'd be like, yeah, the purple and pink woman.
That's nice. That's good. Now you talked about, and you talk a lot about pre-birth choices. And I have some questions. Number one, can you explain for, again, our business people who don't understand, how can you make a choice before you're born? Can you explain that?
Okay. All right. So, so we have got to stop thinking about thought as if it's something that originates from the brain, which it does not. The brain is nothing but an organizer of thoughts. It communicates kind of like a cell phone tower. It communicates information from non-physical to physical. So the brain basically creates this cascade, which we see as neuropeptides, and within the body, so that the body reacts to a thought. That's all that the brain does. And thoughts really are a byproduct of consciousness, which cannot be part of the brain. And so before you come into this physical body, you are a stream of this consciousness. I say stream because the physical dimension, we have this idea of beings being like a glob of energy. But we do not have that kind of shape. It's more like a stream. So you are a stream of energy that is perceiving all kinds of things. You have not, you hold the ultimate perspective. You have not solidified yourself to the one perspective of like an identity, such as Teal or whatever, Tamra. So when you're sitting from that perspective, you are sort of surveying this sea of options that you have based on what you already have been, which is every life that's ever been lived, you have this endless sea of options for new things that you could come into. We call that a perspective, new perspectives that you could come into and let that perspective cause new desires within you. And so what you're doing basically, let's say that you're surveying two people. So one of the options you're looking at is a human option. So when I'm looking at the human option, I am looking at a third dimensional perspective. And with the third dimensional perspective, I know that all of these things come along with that perspective. For example, I am the kind of person who cannot fly. It's not the truth of humanity, but right now that's an idea which I will opt into, is the idea that I can't fly.
Right.
And so, all right, so I can't fly. I am going to have a brain which is very analytical, and that's going to give rise to some interesting forms of contrast. I'm not going to be able to take care of myself in the physical dimension until I'm probably 4 years old. You know, that's when I can reach the countertops. That's an interesting form of contrast. So it's kind of like you're choosing off of a buffet table. So that's just from human. So that's just, I'm going to choose into a human. But let's play this game. So you're looking for a kind of life that will help you to understand whatever it is that you think is in alignment with your next evolutionary step. So let's say I want to know what love is. I'm going to, and I understand from universal perspective that the only way to understand love is to understand what isn't love. That means I'm going to be looking for what I think from this perspective is the opposite of love right now. And ironically, the opposite of love is fear. So I'm going to be looking for very fearful parents. So I'm surveying all of the world's population for a group that most closely matches the vibration of fear, which I think is going to help me desire whatever it is that I'm looking for. So let's say that's love. So then you choose basically to come into that one perspective. But just by doing that, you can see it's too difficult for a third dimensional mind to comprehend, but just from choosing into those two parents, if you're even looking at that probability, there is literally hundreds upon thousands, if not millions of probabilities for your potential life paths that come from just that one choice. So like I opt into these parents and this one leaves me when I'm 12 and then I end up, prostituting myself and then I end up finally getting out of that and then I relapse and I'm back on drugs. You can see literally all of these potentials. And so when you come down into your physical life, it's not like you are just walking the path that's already been laid out because it was just only ever a potential and you can see all these potential paths. But what you're doing is you're coming down and by virtue of what you're thinking and paying attention to, you're staying a match to certain potentials and not other potentials.
Okay, and so that said, part of the agreement that we made, the choice, was that we wanted to forget it. We didn't want to just be born and say, okay, I know what I'm doing, let's just play this game. Is that right? Okay. So that said.
Oh yeah. You don't want to hear it?
No, I want to hear it. You're kind of freezing up.
Oh. Okay, I'll try to back my energy up. I do that to electronic equipment. All right. So the best way to understand why we would choose to electively forget is to think about playing a video game. So all of us have sat down and played a video game before. How much more, so you're playing the video game. You know how much you really want the bad guy to die, or you know how much you really want to win. That's a certain amount of desire. How much more would you desire those things if you were able to literally forget your identity and become the identity of the avatar? There is a lot more expansion that is the byproduct of coming solidly into an identity than maintaining this perspective that it's just a movie or it's just a video game.
I love it. And that makes sense. And it wouldn't be fun. I mean, I could say, well, why should I fly to New York when I'm just going to end up back home anyway? I mean, it is the journey, right? It is the journey. It is. Okay, so with that said, go ahead.
Ironically, so source is oneness, right? And in order for us to even desire our way back to what we really are, which is oneness, we need to understand separation. And there is no greater separation than the ignorance of who one really is. That's separation from your true self.
Right.
There is no further kind of separation we could have. Welcome to the human race. No wonder why everybody's watching y'all so intently.
Yeah. And sometimes laughing and sometimes crying, right? Let's talk
No.
about, no? Let's talk about illness. People choose to create and to manifest illness in their lives so that then they can have the experience of either healing it or not healing it. Is that true?
Yeah, that perspective will definitely help you a lot, yeah, through these kinds of conditions. The reason that we manifest any kind of illness is because we are thinking thoughts which hold us out of sync with the vibration of our eternal selves. So we could basically sum that all up to be a word a bit like resistance. If you have any kind of resistance, any kind of thought which makes you feel negative emotion, you are preventing the energy from flowing from your source stream through your physical body. And that is going to result in illness. And so we most often, we do that, and it's not like you would opt into something like that because of wanting to experience that perspective. But usually what it is that we start off in a relative amount of freedom in our lives and in alignment, and then we get more and more out of alignment. Then we manifest an illness, and we are put in a kind of crossroads situation where we choose to either succumb to the illness completely or completely change the way we're doing life and thus release resistance enough to not be a match to that illness anymore. So when we're turning back and looking at it, we could say, oh yes, very much so, that illness is what it took for me to get into this new place where I'm at. It's this awesome gift that I was given. But we're always getting to that place by virtue of resistance. It's not like the universe is going to hand you some illness because it's best for you to know that lesson.
Got it. Got it. So when we experience or when people experience spontaneous healing, what that really ultimately is that we've gotten into alignment.
Yes. And some of you can do it in a second.
And so that leads us as we'll start talking a little bit about manifestation, but that's why I wanted you to give that background, because I think it's everything. And so with that said, when people come to you, and when you used to take personal clients and you talk to people all the time, oh, I want abundance, oh, I'm blocking my own way. Everything ultimately boils down to getting in alignment. Is that correct? You have to back up your energy again.
Oh, it's quite. Oh yes, and it's quite simple, and it's kind of hilarious because human beings, myself included. Okay, human beings, myself included, tend to be the kind of beings who make things more complicated than it really needs to be. In the moment that you are in, you really have one option, which is to feel better or worse. You have one option, to think a thought that feels better or worse, and there's nothing else that's available to you. And so it really is as simple when we say in alignment, everyone's like, what the hell does that mean? Right. It is that simple. Like, I could literally shut up all day long and just tell you, just do what feels good, and a person would find their way quite quickly. But it takes some balls to be the kind of person in this day and age to do that.
Yeah, it does. So it's so funny because I did a practice video with my daughter, who's a little actress in LA, yesterday, and the video was just so smooth. And I mean, I'm not psychic, but I can feel your energy, and I can see the videos like shaking all over the place. I'm like, Teal, you've got all this power, and it exudes, and I can feel it. But it's the electric thing, right? It just kind of makes you jiggly. Okay, so talking about that, one thing that I'm curious about, and I've had a couple people ask me, is that when people say, oh, I want a lot of money, is it really the money they want, or is it really the feeling that whatever the money would buy gives them? And isn't that what they should focus on more, is the feeling?
We are only ever chasing a feeling. All of this physical stuff is nothing but an excuse to feel a certain way. To get yourself into whatever feeling state you're convinced money is going to bring you before you have that money. The money would come so fast it would no longer matter. And I realize that's about that's the frustrux of the minute you get something is the minute you don't really care whether it's there or not because you already have that emotional state. But I think it's useless to try to talk people out of wanting money and talk them into wanting an emotional space. I think it's what does better is to help them line up with whatever they want as soon as they possibly can, so that when they're standing in that place of having that thing they've always wanted, they can amend their desire now. Maybe they know now that money isn't the end all be all of the universe, and then they go in the direction of something that feels better now that I have money, and that step would not be possible if they didn't get the money first. So I see this thing happening quite often in spiritual communities where it's like, we got to get away from this money thing, when in reality we got to teach ourselves to fall in love with the money thing, let ourselves go get the money thing so we can figure out that's not what we're actually after.
Beautifully said. And I will tell you from my own experience, it's so funny because I've been in real estate for years and years, and it's always been a constant money, 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 battle, battle, battle. But I'm a novelist. And so as soon as like a year ago, I shifted and I'm like, I'll still sell some houses to pay the bills, but I love writing so much that I don't care if I'm making money or not. And then it just comes to me. It's so funny because I love writing so much that I don't even care if I get famous for it. I just love to do it, you know? Same
Oh yeah,
thing.
and the minute you're in that vibration, what happens to your abundance level?
Just I don't ever have to worry about anything, it feels like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But this is the thing though, we don't think that's what happens. And so we are all stuck in this rat race, convinced that if we do what you just did, let's go out on a limb and let's just do what we really want to do, what makes us really passionate, everything's going to go to hell.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. And people think like that.
So we're stuck in this prison, which is illusive. It's complete illusion. Oh yeah. Well, it's tempting. And most of us have to get so sick of our lives we don't care if we die. And then we choose to do that. And it's kind of like you're watching a person. This is what it looks like vibrationally. The person's hanging onto a cliff going, I don't want to die. I can't drop. I can't let go. And then they let go. And they realize it's like 2-inch drop. And they're laughing at themselves, and they're laughing at everybody else. And everyone else is hanging on to the same way. And we're going, oh my God, it's a 2-inch drop. You guys let go. But you don't really know it until you're sick enough of holding on that you don't care if you fall like thousands of miles.
Right. Okay, so with that said, I want to talk a little bit about this wonderful book. I don't know if you can see it or not, but I've highlighted the hell out of it. I think, in my opinion, it is the perfect response to people asking, what is the law of attraction about? But it has the spiritual spin. So with that said, let's talk about, and I get so tired of the phrase law of attraction because it's been so, I'm sure you do too, because it's getting so much lip service and it has such a deeper meaning. So can you tell us the Teal Scott version of what the law of attraction is?
Yeah, Teal Scott version is this. We live in a vibrational universe first. That is energy that vibrates in a certain way. It's that vibration that dictates how it manifests. So it is the vibration that dictates whether it manifests as a tabletop or Teal Scott. All that separates me from the table is a vibration. So, and the law of attraction basically states, which is how this whole physical dimension is managed, that the only vibrations which can share the same space are vibrations which match. And so for me to experience something in my reality, I have to have a vibration already present within me that is a match to that particular vibration. For example, if I am constantly thinking about, I am a perfect vibrational match to circumstances and events which will then make me feel more powerless and worthless. And so your entire reality is like a mirror hologram, which was how the third dimension was designed. And that's really the best way to think of the law of attraction. The third dimension is a mirror hologram. Whatever vibration you have present within you will reflect exactly on the external level. That means if I'm not over my issues with my mommy, I will continue to run into women that remind me of my mommy. And so it's like same, different names, different faces, same issues. Until I am able to purify that vibration a bit, change my thoughts about that circumstance a bit, and thus my external reality will change.
You're reading my mind, I think. I brought her leftovers last night. The woman won't leave me alone. But Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. Okay, so that said, and we'll touch on self-worth in a minute, but with that said, Teal, what do we do? You know, you get in that place where I want to be in alignment. I want to be, for all my salespeople, followers out there, I want to be a top salesperson or whatever your career is, and you really get into it. But it's the little things, and it's a trigger. How do we learn to overcome those triggers so that we can stay in alignment? And I realize that's what life's all about, but do you have any tips for that?
Yeah, you learn to love the triggers. That is end all be all of your life, basically. If you really want to get to a place where you are loving your life, then one of the best ways to do that is to fall in love with those triggers. Because a trigger is always an indication that there's something there to look at. And if there's something there to look at, if there's more to learn about yourself, then there is always a better place for you to reach. So like, let's say that right now I have a trigger coming up about, like a girl in my life, and this person's bugging me, right? So that feeling is an indication that there's something there to look at. And when I look at it, when I ask myself what really bugs me about that, I find out that this person is basically mirroring my relationship with my mother. And so I look at that. I try to change my perspective about my mother. Even the awareness that this whole pattern is happening brings you into a different vibratory rate relative to the whole damn circumstance. So you're match different things. And once you start to recognize this pattern where, look, even if I have the awareness of what's going on in a different vibration and thus manifesting different results, you'll have a different reaction to the triggers, because you'll notice that the triggers are responsible for a whole better life that you're about to be living. So you're no longer afraid of them. It's not like I hit the trigger and then my life gets worse. It's I hit the trigger and then guess what's on the other side of that trigger? My life gets a whole lot better. So pretty soon those triggers start to get exciting. It's sort of like a growing pain, and that means you're going to grow a lot. That means what's waiting for me on the other side of this rainbow is pretty sweet.
I like it. I've never heard it put like that. That makes sense. So every time that there's a trigger that goes off, be like, okay, here's another opportunity for me to work on something about myself, and until we can learn to subdue those triggers, or we don't subdue them, we learn from them, and then they eventually subside.
Yes.
Very good, very good. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit that I'm really curious about. When you say the brain is just a part of our body, and then of course we have the spiritual realm and dimensions. How important is our brain? And explain neurotransmitters and deep meditation and all of those things. I've studied brain science, and I'm just fascinated by all of that, the neural pathways, and how we can reach deeper meditation. What can you say about that?
In terms of meditation? Well, your brain basically creates these pathways to get you either more focused physically or less focused physically. It's ironic. You can actually set up your brain to expect to sort of like for there to be a disconnect between the consciousness and the physical reality. And when there is that sort of disconnect, your body is less addicted to its own, identity. So what you'll watch basically with somebody who practices meditation over and over again, practices that state of really withdrawing, I guess, from the belief in their own thoughts, and thus withdrawing from the manifestation of those thoughts, which is your physical dimension, you'll start to see brain waves occur, especially alpha brain waves and theta brain waves. And this person can actually train their brain that within it, usually the breath is what they use. They'll train their brain, because that's what the neural pathway does. The neural pathway basically says, oh, I'm an efficiency expert, right? The brain is an efficiency expert. So if you think a thought over and over, like, we're calm now, pretty soon I'm going to take over your job for you because I'm the efficiency expert. I'm going to create a neural pathway that does that for you, so you don't really have to think about it, right? Don't take much focus anymore. Right. Thank you, brain, when it's beneficial. So then that neural pathway is formed, and pretty soon all you literally need to do is focus on the breath, and that neural pathway goes, and you're instantly in a totally different brainwave. So I feel like relative to brain psychology, the best way to think of it literally is my brain is an efficiency expert. Anything that I think often, my brain's going to take over the job for me. So if I've had a parent who's told me that I'm worthless for years upon years upon years, my brain is set up to think thoughts like worthless. It's set up to take those thoughts rather than communicate them to the brain so fast that I don't even know I'm thinking it anymore. That's all the subconscious is, by the way. All the subconscious is I've thought this thought so often, my brain has now taken it over for me because it thinks that that's a benefit to me. Because the brain's a non-judgmental organism. I mean, it's all about self-preservation, but it doesn't judge whether a thought is good or bad. It judges whether you think it often. If you think it often, it says, okay, I'll help you out with that. My job. And that's when it starts to get real frustrating for humans, because it's like, wow, I could be focusing real hard on all these positive thoughts, but I just fired off 10 negative thoughts in the time it took me to fire off these 2 positive thoughts because my brain has taken charge of that. That's the neural pathway thing. So if we can deliberately orient our focus towards things that feel emotionally good over and over again, no judgment, just pull it back over and over again to something that feels good, pretty soon the brain does the same thing it did with the negative thought. It goes, all right, I'm an efficiency expert, so I'll take care of that for you, and it creates a neural pathway for that brand new thought, till pretty soon you literally don't have to think about it. It's just...
So that's a fabulous, I love how you explain that. So basically, because my next question was going to be about the subconscious mind. I see people, they're doing the right things and they're doing the affirmations and everything that they should be doing, hypothetically, but yet there's this subconscious programming. And so for those people, you would say, just focus on the things that you want and feel good things, and that will eradicate, it will help itself.
Oh yes, and take advantage of those triggers. See, because the triggers in your this is the benefit of the physical dimension. I may be unaware of all these things that are in my quote subconscious mind, things my brain is taking control of, yet it's still manifesting. So when you invite this person into your reality, you don't know you invited them, but when they come into your reality and it's like, oh God, I hate that person, right? This is the perfect time to see what's at play in your subconscious. You're actually seeing it reflected. And so your subconscious mind, even though it feels like it's out of control, of you, and sort of like you got to go deep sea diving into this obscure darkness where you don't know what you're going to find, you don't even know what's there, you don't even know what you're looking for. You don't need to even do that because it's going to manifest in your reality because it is a thought you think over and over again. So that's what I mean by these triggers being a real benefit to you, because when they happen, it's like, aha, there's something that just surfaced from my subconscious. I still have mommy issues.
Yeah, good.
Then we get to deal with something tangible.
Right. And I noticed, for years I've been using the brain synchronicity when I meditate. You know what I'm talking about, right? There are recordings that you wear headphones with, and it does the hemisphere thing, so it helps you get into a deeper meditation. Yeah, and I just like like holosync. So I really like those things, and when people say, well, I can't meditate, I can't sit still, that's something that I've recommended to friends and things, because it is hard to sit there and to get really deep. Do you have any advice for that for people who, and we have so many viewers who do not meditate, so I would really like to encourage that, and I'm wondering if you have any words of wisdom to help them and to say how profound and important it could be to meditate.
I would say that if somebody has the desire to meditate, the very best way of doing it would be to go in very small increments. I would do no longer than 5 minutes.
Okay.
And all that 5 minutes is you just bringing your thought back to something. So it doesn't necessarily need to be the breath. It's just most people who do meditation use the breath. And it's just an exercise in bringing your focus back. That's all we want it to be. So ultimately, meditation is about stopping thought. And that stopping thought enables there to be a gap there where you actually find your true self, because all these thoughts are really in front of what your true self is, which is the space between these thoughts. So you will notice that you're like it's sort of like a monkey on a leash when you sit down and you start practicing. And this is how it is for everybody. This is sort of a very important message for people starting to meditate. It's not like some people are more adept at this than others. They really aren't. There are, allowing people on the planet Earth, I'll grant you that. But the majority of people sit down and start to try to orient their focus toward about a half of a second. And their brain, like a monkey on a leash, is jumping all over the place.
Right.
And so it's really this exercise. In order to stop thought, you need to understand that you can control thought first. And the word control is such a mixed vibration, but I don't know what other word to use. It's basically the act of deliberately orienting your focus. And so when you're sitting down, you just bring your thought back. And when your mind wanders, no judgment, because you can expect it's going to do that, just bring it back. And bring it back. And then pretty soon the mind brain, like sessions of doing this, what you'll see is that time that you're able to focus on the breath or whatever you want to focus on starts increasing and increasing and increasing. And you'll notice that when you're focusing on just that one thing, there's this profound sensation of relief that occurs because your mind is not infiltrating you with all kinds of thoughts and thus complicated emotions which mirror those thoughts. So it's a way of setting yourself free by deliberately choosing where you place your focus. And it's quite important for people to do. It's just that, it always upsets people who are really attached to meditation when I then put this little caveat in here. From a non-physical perspective, you did not come to the physical dimension in order to meditate. You came here in order to experience the physical dimension. It's just that we would rather that people who are here be in an attitude of positive focus. But no focus is better than negative focus. And usually it's too big of a gap for people to jump from negative focus to positive focus. And so meditation is the best way that has ever been found to stop thought first. So even though it's very difficult for people, it's kind of like if you really want to live a happy life where you're thinking positively, it's easier when you're thinking negatively to stop thought than to try to force yourself over here to where you're feeling good. But if a person could think positive thoughts and rely on themselves to orient their focus positively, there would be no need for meditation whatsoever.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so besides the feel-good factor, can you talk a little bit about, and you have this knowledge of science and you talk subatomic particles and all that stuff I've heard, but about how visualization from a scientific perspective, if you can, how it manifests. I mean, I know I've seen my New York Times best-selling novelist. I've seen it in my mind so much that when it happens, it'll be like, yeah, I already knew it. But so what happens on a subatomic level that creates these pictures in our mind and makes it manifest? You're so cute.
Oh God. Okay. We're at a bit of a miss here scientifically, and this is changing, but we're at a bit of a miss because the science exists to explain one thing, and that's the physical dimension. And when you're talking about manifestation, you cannot just talk about the third dimension. So as long as our science continues to stay in the room called the third dimension, we are never going to have a scientific explanation as to how this happens. But I'll give you the perspective from, a multidimensional perspective. And this is how it goes. When you are visualizing, you are accessing fourth, fifth, and sixth dimensional realities. And it's basically a wave of probabilities. And when you focus on those things enough, you are actually capable of collapsing that quantum wave function into physical dimensional reality. And everything, like I said, is a vibration. Pretty soon, when you focus on it enough, when that wave function collapses just enough that it's a vibratory rate that your organs of perception can perceive, your eyes will see that billboard in New York City saying best-selling author.
That makes sense. It's just, it's so, see, my thing is that science is stubborn, and now you've explained it beautifully why they're stubborn is because that's their realm. That's all they can really see. Except for Einstein. Wasn't Einstein super brilliant?
Yeah, and even he was not even close to some people that have existed. Most of the people that are the very best in terms of these not even new philosophies, the best at cracking the scientific walls down so that they can see the truth of this universe, most of them are hushed up so quickly that most of us never even hear their names. If they're not killed first, which is another story entirely. But I want to tell you a joke just because your viewers will enjoy it. The joke I like to make about modern science is that, I mean, it has a role, and of course, like it a lot, but it's become its own religion. And anytime, the way to describe modern science is this: modern science is like a person that has lost a key in a house, but they are convinced the only room there is to that house is the room they're in. And so they keep looking around the room for the key. And you could come in from any dimension you like and say, guess what? The key is not in this room. In order to find the key, you're going to have to leave the room. And they keep looking at you and saying, there's nothing outside the room. End of story. And until these scientists of ours, and it's getting good now in this day and age, until these scientists of ours are willing to say, okay, maybe I'll open the door and see if there's something more than just this room, they're never going to find the key. But science is always kind of playing a catch-up game with thought. It always has. I mean, it took a person saying, oh my gosh, maybe the world is round, for science to then prove that it's true. So it's not like this is an abnormal thing that happens where thought...
There, do you, when you're in your house, Teal, do sometimes light bulbs just go out?
All the time.
I mean, I can just see it with you. I can just feel it. I can feel it.
Oh, glasses shatter too. That's my favorite. My own personal favorite party trick, which I don't actually intentionally do. But a lot of times when I get amped up, I got to be careful if there's like any silica around, like glass or like crystal, because it'll go from sitting here to like flying across the room and smacking stuff. So,
and that is because, is it because your alignment, is that a reflection of that? Your alignment is so pure that the energy just vibrates?
It depends. My alignment goes up and down, but it's the frequency that I hold is so much higher than the majority of humans here that I affect things in a much different way than most. Like, for example, my auric field vibrates at a frequency which is very difficult for anything that works on magnets or electricity. It's kind of like, expecting a computer to work around me, especially when I'm really vamped up, is kind of like taking two wires, connecting the computer, electric shocking it, and expecting it to run exactly the same way it should.
Right, right. So here's a question for you. Can someone like myself or just anyone who has a true desire and intention, can they learn to read auras and that, or is that just something that some people are not ever going to be able to do?
I think anybody that is physically manifested and has the desire to do so can do so. There is nothing that you can desire that you don't have the wherewithal within you to achieve, because the law of this universe literally does go like this. If you can desire it, it is meant to be yours. End of story.
Okay.
Because it serves the universe for it to be yours, you see? So if you desire to be a multimillionaire, guess what? You're meant to be one. Why? Because the universe knows that once you are one, there's going to be all kinds of new desires broadcast from you, much more than from someone who desires something that they never reach. I mean, think about this. Like, let's look at the mileposts. Let's say that I want money, and that's one milepost. The person who can't ever really get to that milepost actually serves the universe less in terms of expansion than somebody who lines up with this milepost, has a new desire, lines up with that milepost, has a new desire. You are meant to get anything you desire. There's no exceptions to this rule. So if it's somebody's desire to be able to see auras or jump out of body into the Akashic record, it is definitely within every possibility and probability for them to achieve that state.
Excellent. Good to know. Now, one of my final questions is, we hear there's so much, I don't watch the news myself, but there's so much going on in the media and politics and blah, 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 blah. I believe that we're entering a new age and a better age, and that things will turn around, but there's a lot of negativity out there. And so my question is, from your vast knowledge, do you see us healing and growing, or do you see what everyone else says and it's just like, forget it, the bad guys are coming and we're out of here?
I see both perspectives, but when you see both perspectives, you see one as kind of the catalyst for the other. It doesn't take a genius to watch a war zone and see the kind of beauty that is broadcast from a war zone. And that may sound very controversial when I say it, but human beings are at their best when circumstances are at their worst. It usually takes a hurricane or a flood for us to forget skin color. And so when you think about unity and you think about peace you think about war. Because humans, look at the collective consciousness of the humankind. There was no greater peace that had ever been hatched from the human race than that was broadcast after World War II. So was Hitler the cause of all of this, unrest, or was he, in fact, a catalyst for peace? It's an interesting new perspective, and it's a revolutionary one, and it's not one that many people want to entertain. But I can tell you, if you want to entertain that, that doesn't mean go be the Contrast. None of us are going to feel good, really, if we go become Hitlers, but we're going to suffer if we don't see the value inherent in some of these things which we are looking at and calling horrific and calling suffering. We wouldn't wish that on anyone, and that means that it's right for us, those of us who know what we want, if it's peace or whatever, to focus on that. It's just if we continue to look at all of the injustice in this planet, we will attract more of it. And if you continue to focus on more and more levels of unrest, you will attract more of it until pretty soon your worldview is pretty crappy. And then you find out, what good is this really doing? I'm not even helping anyone. Why? Because I can't even get off the couch. And all of us who are bleeding hearts have experienced that, condition. I am guilty of the same, where sometimes, despite all of my merit, and despite coming down here and being so incredibly driven towards inspiring the human race, even I sit on the couch and say I give up some days. But it's by virtue of what I'm choosing to focus on. The news camera
You're frozen.
I am.
You are. I've never in my life, I've never seen someone do on the video. It's like crazy. I've never seen that. I mean, there's just no technical explanation for it. So.
Am I back now?
No, you're still, you look like a Monet painting. There, you're coming back. Calm down that energy for just one more minute. So my final question, what I would like you to do and use this opportunity is to kind of share with the audience what you're doing. You made the comment, which sounds very lofty, that you want to inspire whatever it was you said, you want to inspire human nature. But what are some of the specific things you are doing? You've got the spiritualcatalyst.com website. You've got this fabulous book that I want everyone to get, and I'm going to put it on my Facebook. You've got all of these other things, but what are some of your other projects? You're using video a lot to reach people and interviews. What else have you got going on?
Well, the thing I'm the most excited about is that I started a company this year called Teal LLC, and it's going to be a fusion company. Part of it is going to be for-profit, and part of it's going to be non-profit. But ironically, I don't need to explain a non-profit enterprise to you. The for-profit enterprise is still not a traditionally for-profit enterprise. What it is basically is that nobody gets paid out of the account, not even me. And it just continues to basically roll its own money into more and more investments that have to do with positive world change. And that rolls into more investments for positive world change. So we can get some of these people, like I said, these scientists who are hiding because nobody funds them. We can fund them and have so much money by the end of it that these projects just keep going, one into the next. It's like if you were to invest in a company, which my company does, you invest in a person or an idea, and then you're getting a percentage on that idea, but that percentage doesn't go to paying anybody out. It goes right back into another idea. Pretty soon, it doesn't take a genius to know it. This turns into this giant snowball that is absolutely unstoppable. And this is the kind of snowball which needs to be built in order to undercut what is going on currently with our governments, which are really just extensions of our company.
Right. Now, you're talking about these scientists, do you worry about that?
So that's the one that I might implement. Do I do what?
Do you worry when you're talking about the government, and they do like, if you come up with a cure for cancer, forget about it, they're going to shut you down. Do you ever worry about that? Because you are making a huge impact, girlfriend.
So, okay. Am I there? Not like, are we good?
We're good.
Okay, so the answer is, yeah. In my weak moments, I do worry about it sometimes, but then I realize that, the reason that we fear things is because we don't understand the way this universe works, and it doesn't matter how big your government is. Your government still operates under the law of attraction, which is going to trump anything. And so if I, along with the people who are on tandem with this mission of mine, am able to focus on what I want and not get myself stuck in the muck of basically people trying to stop me, i.e. if I'm not pushing against them, if I'm going in the direction of what I want, I cannot be a match to their bullets even if I want to. So, by virtue of my focus, you're actually able to transcend all these things which people don't think you're able to transcend. People think that somebody walking into the room with a gun, that's the end of it if they choose to shoot you, but that's not the reality of this universe. The reality of this universe is if you are able at that moment that somebody has a gun to your face to think a positive thought, you're not a match to the bullet. The cartridge cannot go off. The bullet will literally bend in space and time. So when you understand those principles of the universe, which is ironically the principles where, which are martial artists take advantage of, then it no longer becomes really necessary to think about what they're going to do and not do.
Absolutely. Very, very well said. And for people who are watching this video, go look on YouTube and look up Teal Scott, because she's got some great videos. And one of them that I love is, I think it's 10 ways to raise your frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fabulous. And really, if you just watch that and watch it every single day, you will raise your energy, raise your vibration, and then watch all the rest to educate yourself. Good idea?
Yeah.
Teal, I want to thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, I would hope so.
Yeah. I want to thank you for being here. And you know what? I'm behind you 100%. So I'm going to get the word out. I'm going to share this. I'll let you know when it's live. And I will be sharing your videos and your books and just anything I can do to help get the word out. I am happy to help you.
Okay, thank you so much for having me.